Canadians love to travel. In 2016, millions of Canadians went abroad for either work or pleasure. But what do you know about the people working to make your hotel experience perfect? Millions of women around the world spend their day cleaning hotel rooms. Their efforts contribute to the record profits of the hotel industry, but in exchange, they are paid poverty wages.
And when we hurt ourselves and we try to tell them, they don't believe us.
Injury rate for room attendants in North America's hotel industry is greater than that in the meatpacking industry.
The slave time is back again.
Everything is just like driving people to clean as many rooms as possible for as little money as possible.
Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel here. It's me here, Comrade Lavender here, and today I'm back with another anti-capitalism deep dive YouTube video topic. Today I want to talk about the pure evil, the tourism industry files, deep dive, capitalism, and true crime. This YouTube video that I'm making is just a compilation of some of my YouTube videos that I made in the past. It's just put together in a large, very long compilation video that I've gathered relating to tourism and things I've done in other videos. Like, for example, the restaurant industry, the hotel industry, things like that have to do with the tourism industry. All that is going to be in this video. So before we get started, all my YouTube videos and disclaimer, I am not going to be posting the full video that I've done. It's just going to be a small portion of the video that I made. If you want to watch the full video, I'm going to put all my YouTube videos that are related to this topic that are in this video on the screen right now. If you'd like to check that single topic out in the whole video, all my YouTube videos related to this topic right now that I put in this video are going to be on the screen right now. So let's get started on this YouTube video topic.
This is our first negative review in a long time. A meal at this restaurant costs $700 per person with a wine pairing. This is our 6th time dining here. They recently just got an additional Michelin star, so now they have 2. But believe it or not, our experience here for the first time since having 2 stars was actually the most negative one. First up, we noticed the wine pairing seemed a bit off, disjointed, pours came at awkward times, and the choice to pair the wine with that dish was never clearly conveyed, which for $200 you expect to get a sense of why each wine was chosen for that specific dish, but this never happened. Another aspect we didn't enjoy was our friend, who was the only woman in our group, was told she would be getting smaller portions. We know this is a common practice in some places for omakase, but she didn't ask for it, and if the price also hasn't been adjusted to account for the smaller portions, then everyone should receive the same amount. Lastly, Tiago was getting full by the end of the meal. The last piece placed in front of him was a chutoro nigiri, which Tiago politely said would be his last piece. And this next part is really why we won't be back. Tiago was reaching for the piece so I could eat it when the chef snatched it up before he could and threw it in the trash right in front of us. We were all pretty taken aback by it. We discussed this with the team after the meal, and they told us this was done because a piece of nigiri can't sit out for more than a few seconds or it goes bad. Of course, that's just a really bad excuse. No piece of food is going to spoil in a matter of seconds. The mindfulness of how we consume food and what we waste is really important, and to see food being snatched up like this and thrown in the trash was pretty shocking. So unfortunately, Sushi Naz is definitely not worth the special trip it once was.
The average American spends over $2,500 a year at restaurants. In Philadelphia alone, the restaurant industry reported 2007 revenues of $2.3 billion. When it comes to a memorable restaurant experience, restaurant diners do not hesitate to spend money. The dollar price of a restaurant meal is paid for at the end of the night, but most people have no idea just how expensive the social cost of eating out is. Whether we know it or not, we as restaurant diners are intimately connected to restaurant workers. We rely on them to cook our food, serve it in a memorable way, and then clean up after us. However, while we focus on the food presented before us, we pay little attention to the waiters, the cooks, the dishwashers, and all the other restaurant workers who make our meal possible. Who are these people? How are they treated? What are the problems they face? What price do they pay so that we can enjoy our meal? The money that diners expect to go into the pockets of restaurant workers often gets stolen by their employers.
Back of the house workers is they're just massively underpaid. So as a good example, I have a client who recently came in. He worked at a pizza restaurant and he was paid $400 a week for 69 hours of work. And that comes out to about $6 an hour. And that's $6 an hour if you're paid $6 an hour for every hour you work, if you're not getting the overtime premium. If he worked 69 hours, I don't remember exactly what the calculation is, but he should be getting around $630, $640 every single week.
そうですね、特に最近私が9年ぐらいやっていて、思うのは女性のやっぱりリーダーシップ教育とかお寿司の教育そのものをまずは変えていこうと思っています。
Racism in the culinary industry, the stories of Black people in this industry. For a cook, sharing recipes, ideas, and inspiration is definitely well suited to a video format. However, these opportunities are not often extended equally to everyone. Discrimination in the cooking industry, especially where TV and video are involved, has stifled the creativity of diverse contributors since the field's inception. Paula Deen's lawsuit, Bon Appetit scandal, and the controversy surrounding various restaurants are just a couple of the more high-profile incidents. In March of 2012, Lisa Jackson, the former manager of Uncle Bubba's Seafood and Oyster House, owned by Food Network star Paula Deen and her brother, filed a lawsuit against Deen and her brother for racism and sexual harassment. She explained that Black employees were held to a higher standard of performance, were called demeaning names, were required to use separate bathrooms and entrances than white colleagues. Deen's brothers often made racist remarks and sexual comments, which Paula was accused of enabling. Paula admitted to wanting her brother's wedding to have Black tap dancers to simulate a time when Black people waited on white people and to say the N-word. Yet Deen stars today in the latest season of MasterChef on Food Network. Restaurants here flourished after the Civil War, a period when Black people in the hospitality sector was still technically working for free due to the widespread adoption of tipping, which allows employers to avoid paying their workers. Racism literally shaped the restaurant landscape too. Here on Long Island, the racist practice of redlining preventing Black restaurateurs from obtaining business loans or leasing buildings in particular towns, and thus denied them the same opportunities as their white counterparts. The effects of such discrimination have been everlasting, something that they have learned firsthand as a Black server and diner. In the 6 years I've worked in restaurants, I never saw a person of color, Black, Indigenous, and people of color in management or even a Black bartender. Most people of color were forced to remain in the back of the house, washing dishes, bussers, or runners in the front of the house. As a diner, I've seen how the industry's culture of discrimination plays out from the other side of the table too. One evening, while I was training a server at a farm-to-table restaurant, I asked the trainer how she made recommendations. And they said, well, they're Asian, so I recommend the octopus because Asians eat weird food. She said the table we just served. Excuse me? I replied sternly. She tried to backpedal and say something how Italian guys also loved octopus. Months later, I caught one of the managers and two servers discussing the treatment of Black people as it relates to our work ethic. The manager implied that there were times we were treated better than we deserved because of our skin color. The two servers looked shocked, but neither corrected her. Being the only Black employee and server of color, I quit immediately. Although the guests at the restaurant usually treated me with respect, I was degraded on several occasions. One evening, while I was recommending wine to a table, one of the diners, a white man, winked at me and said, "The blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice, am I right?" There was so much I wanted to say, especially to his wife who just laughed nervously. Instead, I recommended the wine and walked away. Who could I tell? If a manager wouldn't be checked, how would I guess? I stayed at the restaurant for a year and a half. Shortly before my departure, one of the customers, a senior citizen, grabbed me. He said, "You know what they say about Black women," he whispered in my ear. "You taste like chocolate." He then attempted to kiss me. I pulled away, but I didn't want to hurt him. I could already imagine the news headline, "Black server abused elderly white man at Long Island restaurant." So again I walked away, but this time I cried in the hallway while my coworker consoled me. Other coworkers seemed to think I was overreacting, as if the customer had only given me a compliment. I didn't have the energy to point out that Black women are neither a fetish nor a fantasy, and that the sexual harassment we often experience is linked in the ways we've been hyper-sexualized throughout history. While the restaurant clientele was genuinely kind, there was still the middle-aged white men thinking they were Tupac, telling me I was the prettiest black girl they've ever seen, and the white woman who felt the need to be down when I approached the table. "Hey girl," one of them told me, "your makeup is on fleek. We're trying to get lit." "Know that I'm laughing at you," I thought. "You sound like Lynn from 30 Rock. You are 45 years old in a Talabot pantsuit. Please stop." Discrimination in the kitchen has come to light in other restaurants as well. Kami Ashui, a cook at 11 Madison Park, described the racist behavior he experienced in the kitchen from Chef Christ Flint in March 2019. Ashui asked Flint not to refer to a specific grader as it is common name Maui in front of the customer, since it was historically a racist slur used by Italians against black people. Flint made light of the situation and told him, "No black people come here anyways." United States restaurants, bars, and food trucks, modern-day capitalism, slavery, and human trafficking persists. In U.S. restaurants, bars, and food trucks, they come from places like Vietnam, China, Mexico, and Guatemala, lured by the promises of better-paying jobs and legal immigration. Instead, they're smuggled into the United States, forced to work around the clock as bussers, waitstaff, and cooks, and housed in cramped, unhygienic living quarters. For this, they must pay exorbitant fees that must be an insurmountable debt, even as their pay is often withheld, wage theft, or stolen or unfairly docked. In restaurants, bars, and food trucks across America, many workers are entrapped in a form of modern-day capitalism slavery. Of the more than 1,700 restaurant industry cases, the vast majority of the victims involved immigrants recruited from Mexico, Central America, and East and Southeast Asia. Nearly 1 in 5 was a minor. They include cooks, waitstaff, bussers at restaurants, food trucks, buffets, and taquerias. Traffickers often take advantage of language barriers between exploited workers and patrons. Some victims were forced to provide both sex and labor. Women from Latin America, including many minors, came to America beguiled by promises of good wages, safe migration, or even a romantic relationship. They're put to work selling drinks and sex at bars, says Jennifer Palmrose, data analysis director for Polaris and co-author of the report. Many times, there are legitimate bars and restaurants where they'll sell alcohol, often at inflated prices, but behind the scenes, forced commercial sex trafficking may occur on-site or nearby at a hotel or warehouse. In the motel, she says, traffickers tend to be part of a large criminal organization.
Spends over $2,500 a year at restaurants. But most people have no idea just how expensive the social cost of eating out is. Whether we know it or not, we as restaurant diners are intimately connected to restaurant workers. We rely on them to cook our food, serve it in a memorable way, and then clean up after us. The money that diners expect to go into the pockets of restaurant workers often gets stolen by their employers.
And it's not just that. Mexico is extremely whitewashed nowadays. When you go to anywhere in Mexico, like a really touristy tourism destination, they make the Mexican food less spicy for the white colonizer tourists who can't handle the heat. And it's ruining culture and society. Like, places and countries shouldn't have to change their food just to make tourists happy. Like, I don't know, I just find it really... Hotels, motels, and human trafficking go hand in hand. Capitalism is a safe haven for sexual predators and people preying on people. With global inequality worsening and disparities becoming more prevalent in capitalism systems, vulnerabilities are being exacerbated. Basic needs are being commodified. Workers endure horrendous conditions while being underpaid and wage theft. And vulnerable populations are illicitly bought and sold for non-consensual sexual services as well as non-sexual services. Human trafficking is a booming business, now estimated to be a over $150 billion industry. Under capitalism, trafficking and exploitation thrive. Capitalism enables human bodies, especially those in vulnerable or unstable situations, to be seen as highly expandable, reusable, and profitable objects by those looking to exploit. Traffickers often hone in on these vulnerabilities using Maslow's hierarchy of needs to fill an emotional, psychological, or physical need that the target individual is in search of. Through this grooming process, the targeted individual is reduced to the means to an end that will ultimately result in their exploitation and the human trafficker's capitalism profits. Moreover, many traffickers use legal industries such as public transportation, hotels and motels, social media, and banks to aid the recruitment and continuation of trafficking. And while industries that intersect with human trafficking, like hotels and motels, are beginning to implement trafficking awareness, employee training, but in most cases, hotels and motels knowingly and intentionally turn a blind eye to the capitalism, sexual exploitation, and fear of losing the human trafficker's business. In regards to trafficking, human bodies and services are commodified and sold through force, fraud, or coercion for profits. In 2018, two-year FBI report on suspected countrywide human trafficking incidents, 40% of sex trafficking victims were black, despite only 13% of the U.S. population identifying as black. More than 40 human trafficking lawsuits have been filed against hotel companies and hotel chains. Hotel chains were named and accused of knowingly aiding and abetting and ignoring warning signs that women and children were sold as sex slaves on their premises. Ohio is the fourth largest state in the country for human trafficking, and more than 95% of it happens in hotels. The lawsuits have been filed against major hotel companies. Those companies include Wadham Hotels and Resorts, Hilton Worldwide Holdings Inc., Red Roof Inns, and Choice Hotels International for allowing trafficking to occur on their property and profiting from human trafficking as a whole. You're not allowed to make money from trafficking ventures, and they're clearly participating in a virtue by making money off every room that was rented to these traffickers. The law firms filed the first case in the countries against a hotel for human trafficking in 2019 under a statute known as the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. Since then, he said they've filed other cases in different parts of the country, with most of them being in the state of Ohio. We have had horror stories where people were handcuffed to toilets, and hotel staff, housekeeping, came in, and nobody does anything about it or even cares. According to the Polaris Project, 75% of human trafficking survivors report having come into contact with hotel employees during their trafficking experience. Unfortunately, according to the same study, 94% of survivors say hotel employees did not show any concern, any compassion, or offer any help at all. Relaxing vacations mean little work for travelers thanks to the host of people who work as housekeepers, bellhops, and cooks. But a new analysis has found that a largely invisible nature of these jobs means workers can be exploited. The Polaris Project also reports that there were 482 potential labor trafficking survivors since January 2015 that report working in hotels. These survivors in the supply chain of the hotel industry mostly hold jobs such as housekeeping and subcontractors. Due to these employees not being direct hotel hires, they are much more vulnerable to abuse, such as lacking of pay, wage theft, and unfit working hours. A victim of capitalism of this, her name was Miss Aganton. Ordeal began when she was trying to provide an income for her family. Her husband was incapacitated after a stroke, and the youngest of their three children, had special needs. She applied to work in the United States through a labor recruitment agency. By the time she arrived in Portland, Oregon in 2008 with a dozen other hopeful Filipino workers, she owed $3,000 for her H-2B visa airfare and interest on money that she had borrowed from a lending agency recommended by the recruiter. Although Miss Agaton's contract specified that she would work 40 hours a week at $8.50 an hour as a housekeeper, she said none of the jobs she worked in hotels in Scottsdale, Arizona, Macallan Island, Mitch, and Bossier Parish, LA, gave her those wages, and they seldom gave her that many hours to work. She said, "The agency tricked us," she said. "I was treated like a capitalism slave. The usual deductions, the cost of the bus pass, and the inflated amount for rent were withheld from her paycheck." Miss Acton said, recalling that she sometimes left with as little as only $50 a week for food, loan repayment, and support for her children. And since the H-2B visa is job-specific, she couldn't legally work at a different hotel without a new visa. Her debt continued to accumulate with each renewal. She explained that the broker charged her $750 to apply for a second visa and $1,600 to apply for a third, which also involved a transfer to a new staffing agency. Economic abuse, including debt bondage and withholding or confiscating passports or payments, was the most common type of control reported in hotline cases. According to the Porlist report, Ms. Agaton said that she doesn't believe anyone involved in this whole true crime situation was arrested for their capitalism atrocities. When it comes to the environment and other factors that are bad about hotel industries as a whole, the facade of a 5-star hotel reveals a huge appetite for water, infiltrating various areas of their operations. The landscaping that creates a verdant oasis within the establishments comes at the cost of significant water consumption and usages. The swimming pools, lavish gardens, elaborate fountains, while visually captivating, often conceal the staggering volume of water required to maintain the aldure. Hollywood celebrities got in trouble for wasting water during the California drought. Hotels are kind of doing the same thing. Within the realm of hospitality, the indulgence extends to the realms of laundry and sanitation. The frequently of linen changes, sheet changes, coupled with the demand of immaculate cleanliness, generates an unrelenting stream of water usage. According to the World Wildlife Fund, the average 5-star hotel can expend an astonishing 1.5 million gallons of water every single month. The staggering statistic illuminates the magnitude of the challenge at hand. Yet the implications of this proliferation of water usage beyond sheer consumption, the extraction of such substantial volumes from local water resources poses a severe threat to regional ecosystems. Aquifers and rivers that sustain surrounding communities can be depleted, triggering an ecological crisis and ecological imbalances that transcend the confines of a hotel walls. The water story of these establishments, however, doesn't end with the appropriation of natural resources. The magnitude of water waste has a cascading impact on water quality. The intricate network of pipes, plumbing, and treatment systems can be overwhelmed by the excessive volumes of water discharged. This excess water waste, laden with chemicals and pollutants, can infiltrate local water bodies, contributing to water pollution that disrupts aquatic ecosystems and imperils aquatic life. Air conditioning systems designed to maintain an unvarying cocoon of comfort shoulder a considerable portion of this energy burden. The sprawling lobbies, restaurants, and guest rooms demand a miraculous balance of temperature and humidity, necessitating the continuous operation of cooling electrical systems that consume substantial amounts of electricity. The dazzling lights that grace these establishments, such as the illuminating corridors, pools, swimming pools, and luxury chandeliers, is another contributing factor to energy consumption. Vast arrays of iridescent and fluorescent bulbs, often left aglow around the clock, 24/7, generate an extreme demand for electricity. However, The extravagant energy consumption exacts a toll beyond the confines of hotel walls. The carbon emissions stemming from this energy use contribute significantly to the carbon footprint, amplifying the capitalism-caused climate change crisis. The World Green Building Council highlights that the built environment of luxury hotels are a defining component, accounts for nearly 40% of global energy carbon emissions. Within the lavish realm of five-star hotels, the allure of expensive buffets and lavish spreads fosters a culture of food waste and has profound implications for food resources and the environment as a whole. It contributes to staggering rates of uneaten food, and we all know how bad food waste is. Behind the veneer of luxury that five-star hotels elude lies an insidious undercurrent of plastic pollution. And there's a huge alarming problem throughout the world of a plastic pollution crisis. Beneath the veer of exotic allure at five-star hotels often lies a distressing phenomenon, culture appropriation, an intricate web of practices that commodify local culture for capitalism commercial gain, often at the expense of the very communities from which these cultures elements originate. While these establishments strive to create immersive experiences for guests, the ethical implications of this endeavor are rarely scrutinized. The act of cultural appropriation within luxury hotels manifests in diverse ways, from adopting traditional architectural elements into the design, incorporating indigenous mofers and decor. This exploitation of culture is not only disrespectful, but it also perpetuates economic inequalities. The allure of these culturally infused experiences is often used to attract high-end tourists who have a lot of money seeking authenticity. The irony is that its benefits often fail to trickle down to the very community whose heritage is being harnessed. Local artisans, craftsmen, and performers frequently find themselves marginalized, with their cultural contributions commodified without adequate recognition or reimbursement. Beyond the lavishness of five-star hotels lurks a disturbing fact: animal exploitation, an intricate tapestry of practices that capitalize on sentient beings for entertainment, often at the expense of animal welfare. The offering of activities such as elephant rides and dolphin shows might seem like innocent indulgences, but the veneer of epaulettes belies the distressing reality for the animals involved that are being exploited at these hotels. The training and management of these animals for entertainment frequently involve inhumane methods, abuse, leaving a trail of physical and psychological scars of the animal that was abused at these hotels. How tourism affects the daily lives of people in certain countries, or natives or people of color who live there. That's where they live. They're not on vacation there, but people who literally live in that area. So yeah. So most people that travel to Hawaii, to most Americans, Hawaii is theirs to use, to abuse, to take, and above all to fantasize and fetishize about long after the experience of the vacation. To Native Hawaiians who live there, daily life is neither soft nor kind. In fact, the political, economic, and cultural reality for most Hawaiians, Native Hawaiians, is hard, ugly, and cruel. In Hawaii, the destruction of the culture and land and the prostitution of it is planned and executed by multi-billion-dollar national corporations, by huge landowners who own the land, and by collaborationist state and county governments and officials. The ideological gloss that claims tourism to be the economic savior and the natural result of Hawaiian culture is manufactured propaganda by ad agencies, tour companies, and the state of Hawaii as a whole, in which allocates some $60 million a year to the tourism advertising budget to advertise, tourism in Hawaii. Not only does capitalism play a role in this because it puts profits over human lives and it'll do anything to make profits, but this also plays a role in crime in Hawaii and how tourism drives up the prices and the cost of daily living, in the housing market and food, etc. in Hawaii. Inflation happens and the prices of everything skyrocket and just go boom and go up, and it skyrockets to sky high ends to no end. Fun fact, nearly 1/5 of Hawaii native resident population is classified as poor and as near homeless, which explains the constant rise in beach villages and other homeless enclaves in Hawaii that the Cow's Pigs try to cover up and say, how are we going to get rid of this homeless problem in Hawaii? This doesn't make our state look like the amazing vacation spot that it is. We have to cover this up. The very high cost of living in Hawaii due to the normalization of colonizer tourism industry due to capitalism has encouraged the native people who lived in Hawaii and were born in Hawaii to begin with and were natives, to the land, to leave their home island in the tropics in search of better economic conditions / a more stable life when it comes to economics and the cost of living and housing. Not only that, but tourism, due to capitalism, exploits people of color and natives and the poor and the working class, and exploits the fuck out of them. Native women, like hula dancers, wear caked on, too much makeup, don sexualized costumes from Polynesian cultures, and behave in a manner that is very, scandalous and sexual rather than powerfully erotic in the tourism industry. Like the whole meaning of what it used to mean, it doesn't mean that anymore. It's just now means like native women in Hawaii are now looked at as just sex objects. So areas that had once been sacred to natives are now the sites of expensive bourgeoisie capitalist pig resorts, shorelines where net fishing, local fishing, seaweed gathering, cultural practices and crabbing occurred are more and more exclusive domain of recreational activities such as sunbathing, windsurfing, and jet skiing. Even access to the beaches near hotels is strictly regulated or denied to the local public altogether who live in Hawaii. The Maasai Mara Reserve is one of the world's most famous and recognizable safari destinations in Africa. For the past decades, it has seen continuous growth in high volumes, low revenue tourism. Local communities have very little to gain from this as a whole, while the wildlife has only to suffer. The only people who, have anything to gain from tourism in Africa is the capitalist pigs, because the local people don't get paid that much, and they're suffering, and the land is suffering because of the capitalist pigs and capitalism. Sports hunting was banned in Kenya in 1977. Unfortunately, due to this has led to a massive increase in illegal poaching in neighboring countries like Tanzania and Zimbabwe, as well as Namibia, South Africa, and some parts of Botswana. It remains legal and a considerable source of income for some people without any means to sustain themselves. Local people who live in those communities, resort to illegal activities such as poaching, endangering the wildlife, and even more, illegal activities in countries like Namibia. Revenue from hunting permits is directed towards conservation efforts. So, this pro-capitalism tourist industry really isn't, it's not doing anything good for people, the locals who live there. So they resort because how they're being treated, how poorly, they're being treated, how poorly they've been paid, and the poverty, they resort to, poaching animals because, of how poorly they've been treated. Here are some more facts about this. So, negative impact of ecotourism on people. Locals can be exploited by the capitalist pigs in various ways, such as using them for cheap labor, which is what capitalism does, because capitalism puts profits over human lives and the earth. Local tribes lose their traditional way of life because of capitalism and the capitalist pigs. Some locals/tribes are used as attractions themselves, as in a race, to enable white tourists to get traditional photos of native people in their native habitat, which is literally a colonization. Many companies who run ecotourism trips profit most, while local people earn very little money, if any money at all. Infrastructure is often only beneficial to tourists. Airports, local people cannot afford to use the airport because of how little money the people in the country make overall. Ecotourism is now a large industry, and there are not enough regulations to control how it is operated. So cows, pigs, will again loot the land and stuff. The destruction of local resources to make room for ecotourism is a problem. Trees failed to make lodges for tourists. Trees are being taken down, ripped apart. The earth is being destroyed. Natural resources are destroyed to make souvenirs. Again, capitalism is destroying the earth. How Hawaii lost its queen. The queen of Hawaii, Leela, folly to the fruit tycoons at Dole. Stanford Dole led the coup with the help of the American government. His cousin, once removed, James Dole, started the Hawaiian Pineapple Company, which is now the Dole Food Company on the islands. American militia come to the island, threatening battle, and the Queen surrendered and stepped down. After the coup succeeded, Stanford Dole was named President of the Republic of Hawaii. The depiction of Dole as a 20th century American success story obscures a deeper meaning and history of violence and imperialism. The past violence continues to be ratified and perpetuated through the present-day tourist industry. Pineapple is practically synonymous with the Hawaiian Islands, and Hawaiian Islands, all over, the Caribbean as a whole. And no company looms larger at the image than Dole. Today, tourists can easily take a bus from downtown Honolulu to Wataha to see the Dole plantation experience. Some of the past history is workers were recruited from China, Japan, and the Philippines and Portugal. As a result, the plantation system developed in which companies built frequently segregated schools, stores, and housing for their own workers, which were designed to keep them in a cycle of debt. Despite the image of Hawaii as a laborless and carefree paradise, the operation of pineapple industry required demanding physical labor, frequently performed by women, and as the pineapple industry has historically been one of the largest employers of women on the islands, much of the labor was part-time or seasonal, adventurous for students, but unstable for those who need to provide for their families all year round. These workers often lived in company housing modeled after sugar plantation communities, where they were subject sometimes to heavy-handed paternalistic supervision under the plantation managers. As well as Dole's success came from capitalizing on Hawaiian bodies and a Hawaiian aesthetic to appeal to white American consumers who were led to believe that Hawaii was a far-off exotic place. Despite the economic significance of tourism in Hawaii, the industry has led to environmental destruction in those areas and continues to displace many indigenous Native Hawaiians as they are forced from neighborhoods as real estate prices climb, due to the tourist industry. At statehood, Hawaiians outnumber tourists 2-1. Today, now tourists outnumber Native Hawaiians 30-1. Australia's commercial crocodile skin trade highlights the livelihood benefits they provide to Aboriginal communities in rural areas. Though most of the profit from these crocodile farms and these systems goes to non-Indigenous people, Aboriginal people are often employed in the egg harvesting portion of the trade, which is extremely dangerous given the potential for crocodile attacks from defending mother crocodiles. Payment of as little as 20 AUD per egg is paid to these harvesters, while skin from the crocodiles is made into products sold for $10,000s of dollars to companies. Totem animals are traditionally not killed, worn, or eaten by their people, but protected. For the Lagaria people in Darwin, the crocodile is their totem. While indigenous perspectives vary, the purely profit-driven view of crocodiles as pure commodities is out of element with traditional respect for animals as felling beings on shared land. With more crocodiles living in confinement in factory farms than in their natural habitat in Australia, it is pretty clear that the crocodile farming industry is not for the good of the animals at all. Crocodiles deserve to live freely on their native lands in safety. Their protection cannot be based upon financially invising in their ongoing existence through exploitation, confinement, and slaughter. It is unethical to keep a species in existence purely to profit from them in this way. Everything in this video, by the way, is allegedly, so yeah. Everything allegedly happened, so yeah. So, cheapskate billion-dollar company United Airlines has allegedly killed a disabled activist, Ugresa Furnoa, a fierce advocate for people with disabilities. She passed away on Sunday due to complications from her injuries she sustained when United Airlines allegedly destroyed her custom wheelchair, allegedly during a flight from Washington, D.C. to California to her home. The United Airlines damaged her wheelchair in the cargo hold, and they refused to buy her another wheelchair. And, this is not the first time United Airlines has caused controversy. They've caused controversy in the past, They're very known for their scandals. And instead of United Airlines replacing the demolished wheelchair because it was demolished and it was unsafe, United Airlines insisted that they would only pay for it to have it repaired only, allegedly. But a motorized wheelchair that has undergone that much extensive damage poses a severe risk of fire and is unsafe, in its entirety. The faulty alleged replacement wheelchair was not motorized, allegedly exacerbated her injuries, allegedly. Ultimately, United Airlines later on fully agreed to replace her wheelchair, valued at $30,000. However, in the months in which they fought, so long to, they fought against replacing the wheelchair, took a toll on her body. United employees summoned airport security officers, aka police brutality, who then forcibly removed Dow from a seat with violence and force. Dow's face was slammed into the armrest and his nose was bleeding, and he was dragged off the plane bleeding. Other passengers captured and witnessed this on the scene with their phones, despite the airline's employees trying to cover up people's phones to get people not to record the situation that was going on, sparking widespread outrage at United for their abuses. United CEO Oscar Muniz stated and defended the actions taken on that day. Our employees followed the established protocols and procedures with dealing with passengers like this. December of 2018, flight attendants employed by United Airlines started picketing outside of airports to show their disapproval of proposed staffing cuts. According to CNBC.com, flight attendants felt they planned staffing cuts would negatively impact customer service and safety. Transport Workers United, which represents about 5,000 flight attendants at JetBlue, criticized the airlines, blaming flight attendants for not accepting enough assignments, causing delays and cancellations. The union argued JetBlue had responded to staff shortages and operational problems by increasingly disciplinary actions towards the workers who work their employees, including increasing the amount of critical coverage days workers must be able to work, or else they accrue disciplinary attendance points that could lead to firing/termination. They also said many flight attendants experiencing delays or flight changes have waited several hours for JetBlue to get them to a hotel room or transportation to a hotel room in the city, cutting into the rest time. Some have given up, paid for a hotel or transportation out of their own pocket. You are kept hostage at times and are unable to get home. This is really hard for people who have children or parents that they need to help take care of. The flight attendant said, they're not thinking of us as humans, only robots. We're still human beings involved in this too. The cruise line ship industry is a significant and growing contributor to the economy, providing more than $32 billion in benefits annually and generating more than 330,000 U.S. jobs. More than 53,000 commercial vessel tankers, bulk carriers, container ships, barges, and passenger ships travel the ocean and other waters of the world, carrying cargo and passengers for commerce, transport, and recreation. Cruise ships have revolutionized the way people travel since they first arose in popularity in the 1990s. Travelers can eat, drink, shop, swim, and enjoy entertainment while voyaging the seas. According to the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association, 24.2 million travelers went on a cruise in 2016 alone. Although cruise ships represent a small fraction of the entire shipping industry worldwide, public attention to their impacts have come under fire recently. Working on a cruise ship may sound like a fun opportunity for those who like to travel, but the harsh reality and the cold-blooded reality of many cruise ship jobs is far less glamorous. Two lawyers who represent cruise line workers and passengers told Business Insider in 2018 they often signed to 6 or 8 month contracts. Cruise ship employees can work 7 days a week for a minimum of 12 hours per day. They're overworked and they're underpaid, treated like a capitalism wage slave. Those who have the most physically demanding jobs, like the waiters and cleaners who tend to receive inadequate medical care when they first report an injury, often they'll be given pain medication and sent back to work, even if their injury requires more serious attention. And some employees are fearful of even reporting pain or complaining about their working conditions in any way. Cruise lines can get away with treating their lowest paid workers poorly because they recruit them from countries with limited economic opportunities, so the opportunity to make good money presents itself for their family is tremendous. Thus, they're willing to suffer through difficult capitalism labor conditions and being mistreated like a capitalism wage slave. The Caribbean, the Philippines, and Eastern Europe are major sources of employment on cruise ships, and only about 5% of the cruise ship employees are American citizens or residents. Cruise lines often have a practice known as flying a flag of convenience, which involves registering their businesses and ships in countries like the Bahamas, Panama, and Bermuda with relatively lax labor laws. Cruise lines also include clauses in employee contracts that require them to use arbitration to resolve any conflicts, restricting their employees' ability to sue them. A case of wage theft in the cruise industry amounting to a staggering $2 million Australian dollars aboard the luxury cruise ship MS Claudian Sky. Australian Pacific Tourism makes tens of millions of dollars off the backs of their employees, selling cruise packages that run into tens of thousands of dollars per person, but they are standing back and wiping their hands clean of their crew, who have been robbed collectively of $2 million. Cruise ships have human trafficking and crime problems such as sexual assault is one of the biggest ones, but vacationers at sea are at risk of some serious offenses, most notably sexual assault.
But don't be deceived by the apparent tolerance of Western ways.
Muslim traditions mixed with capitalism on steroids, like child camel jockeys and overcrowded, inhumane labor camps like this one.
Sex outside marriage, holding hands, even kissing someone on the cheek can be enough to have you arrested.
Because fall foul of Sharia law and you're in a whole world of trouble. Just like Australian Alicia Ghali, jailed because she was raped.
I met a 19-year-old woman who was trafficked to Dubai for sex, at times serving more than 30 clients per day against her will. Chinese are the cheapest, around $150. Then Africans and Eastern Europeans. Middle Eastern women fetch the highest amount, up to $1,000 per night.
Trying to infiltrate the community of workers who are putting them up. What he found when he finally got there was that the jewel of the Arab world is almost entirely built off the backs of imported slave labor. Dubai is one of the most well-known centers of modern-day capitalism, slavery, and human trafficking. Beneath the glittering facade of bougie, rich, luxury capitalism lifestyle paradise aesthetic, in the desert lurks a cruel and lethal system of recruitment, transportation, transfer, kidnapping, and defrauding of human beings, mostly women, by the means of threat of force, or the actual use of force, as well as other types of coercion and intimidation, with low-paid migrant workers being subjected to abuses about to forced labor. While exact figures are not known and are unknown, it is estimated that there are at least 3 million of those workers in the UAE alone. Domestic workers are particularly vulnerable to abuse, and so are maids, because they don't have the minimal protection afforded by the UAE labor law. The human rights group said that Kafia's sponsorship system tied migrants to their employers who acted as their sponsors meant workers were at a greater risk of exploitation because they could revoke sponsorship at will, making them liable to deportation. It is estimated that around 150,000 migrant and female workers are employed under this scheme. The wealth of this country is funded by contract workers from some of the world's poorest countries, including Indonesia, India, Philippines, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. Not only do they have to live in dreadful, horrible housing conditions, but the agreed-upon wages are almost never honored, with the average construction worker receiving just $175 a month, compared to the per capita income of $2,100 a month, and wages often being withheld for months on end to ensure the worker doesn't quit. The migrant worker quickly realizes that it will be years before he can even pay off the mounting debts to his recruiters. Never mind begin sending money home to his family or back home or whatever. Without money or passports, these foreign workers have no way of returning home to their families and are forced to continue working in dangerous conditions, often without proper safety equipment in extreme desert heat. What does all this have to do with tourism in Dubai? A lot, actually. Instagram and other social media influencers need to stop encouraging and promoting the glamorization of Dubai's vacation trips there and this rich capitalism luxury lifestyle. I've already talked about how the problematic aesthetic, the pro-capitalism bougie aesthetic is, and how, the whole entire aesthetic is funded by, exploiting the working class. Post content that makes the countries look like paradises where you can get rich. This is harmful to society because it's false advertising. Of course, with Dubai receiving 16 million tourists a year, it's going to take a lot more than just one person to change that. But it's a start. I'm doing my part showcasing the atrocities of capitalism and what's going on there, and how the victims of capitalism are suffering immensely because capitalism is pure misery.
Mount Fuji is one of Japan's most iconic landmarks, and in recent years social media has made photographing it even more popular, but that's created a bit of a problem for residents of Fujikawa, Guchiko, a town with an incredible view which is being swamped by millions of tourists. Residents have now decided they've had enough, and to keep the selfie crowds away, they're taking the unlikely step of putting up a huge barrier to block the view.
Japan is not your Candyland. Near Mount Fuji, there lies a magical convenience store. Above it, a perfect frame shot for the nation's most popular mountain. Too bad you won't be able to get that Instagram-worthy pic anymore, because apparently they set up an 8-foot-high mesh net to block the view. And that's because this tourism spot has become so popular that visiting tourists visiting the country illegally park their cars on the side of the road, toss out their garbage all over the ground, and even climb onto a nearby dental clinic's roof to get a better picture. Locals have had enough, but people putting up the net have said they will take it down if the situation improves. This is why we can't have nice things. The recent flood of tourism is helpful to Japan, but in many ways, unintended consequences are making life difficult for some locals. Dark side of child sex tourism in Bali. Tourism has become a crucial sector for Indonesian society, especially in Bali. However, the large influxes of tourists has brought in various issues, including the involvement of children in sex tourism. The illegal involvement is further exacerbated by the rise of child sex tourism, which includes acts of pedophilia and abuse of minors. There are existing laws in Indonesia that protect children from sexual violence and exploitation. However, the team expressed concerns that enforcement of these laws remains very weak. In terms of traumatic impacts, survivors experience serious physical injuries, including leg lacerations and sexually transmitted diseases. Psychologically, they face distressing dreams, flashbacks, post-traumatic stress disorder, heightened sensitivity to stimuli, negative cognitive changes, and shifts in reactivity. Bali is very renowned for its nightlife parties. In these parties, numerous amounts of residents and tourists come from entertainment purposes. Prostitution is a sinful crime against the moral ethics and civility. However, in Bali, sex tourism is broadly practiced. The survey observation results show that some women are becoming a part of sex tourism due to poor financial conditions. Travel agencies and sex magazines are significantly at play promoting sex tourism through brochures in Bali. Sex tourism is using social media sites to attract the attention of clients. For serving the needs of the clients, the sex tourism industry has taken this type of incentive. However, the involvement of children in sex tourism is creating a significant issue in Indonesia. The people are entering the sex tourism industry due to earn quick money. Among the people of the sex industry, most of them are underprivileged, deprived families from middle-class families. In Bali, male sex workers are referred to as the Kunta cowboys. The male sex workers are involved in providing sex services to foreign tourists. Apart from this, gay and cross-dresser prostitutes are also available in Bali.